The F word is pretty taboo in medicine. Most medical students have got a place at medical school through a lifetime of academic success and always getting top grades in their class. Then you get to medical school and suddenly you're surrounded by more than 200 other students who are also used to being top of the class and, like you, are attuned to academic success. Throw into the mix that many of these students will be highly competitive, often come from privileged backgrounds, and might even have family members putting intense pressure on them behind the scenes. The idea of failure then becomes incredibly daunting. Add to the mix the fact you go on social media and all you'll see is people ranting about their successes or uploading TikToks on how they ranked highest in their year. It's a lot to take in and the pressure is immense. But what if you fail an exam? That seems like it could be the worst possible thing to happen to a medical student given all these things I've just said. Then I am here to tell you firsthand how I recovered from my own personal academic flop after failing a medical school exam. If you're new here, hello, my name's Lydia and I'm a current 4th year medical student in the UK. I'm studying medicine as a graduate, so this isn't my first degree at university. I am now in my 8th year of uni, and when I was in my 2nd year of medical school, I failed my anatomy exam. The email came out and I opened the results, and the results said that I had failed my 2nd year exam. And it was quite a big deal because it meant that I had to resit all of the exams for that year. It was probably one of the biggest challenges I'd ever faced at that time. But I'm here now, 2 years almost down the line, and I've recently passed my 3rd year exams. I did pretty well on those, and I am halfway through my 4th year now. I feel like I've had plenty of time to reflect on my failure and everything that I've learned from it. I know that the response to my I failed video was massively positive, like overwhelmingly positive. At the time I was so scared to share with you guys that I'd failed an exam, and as Elizabeth Day says in her How to Fail podcast, we can learn a lot more from our failures than our successes. So with that in mind, here are 6 steps to bouncing back from failure at medical school. Step 1 is to remind yourself that failing is a part of life. Allow yourself to feel disappointed. You're going to be upset. It really is the worst feeling in the world when you have spent weeks or months working towards an exam and it's not the result you want. That is a horrible feeling, and it's okay to be upset at the time. I want you to also pick yourself up and remind yourself of a few really important things. Failing is so common at medical school. This is a very, very difficult course, and it's difficult for a reason because we are striving to almost perfection. We need to know so many things and we have to get things right because patient safety will ultimately one day, when we're working as doctors, be at risk. So obviously it's a very high standard, it's very difficult. I promise you, you are not the only person who has failed an exam. I know that when I failed, I originally thought only 1 or 2 people in the year group ever fail an exam each year. When I found out how many people had failed the exams, I was shook. It was like 80 people. I was one of 80 people. Like, I was not alone, but I felt so alone because I just assumed that everybody passes. Also, you can't always predict what's going to happen on your exam day. You know, maybe you failed because you didn't do enough revision, but maybe you failed because on the day something happened that was out of your control. Life is still going to happen even though you're doing your revision for your medical school exam. For example, you might go through a breakup, you might be having really bad mental health, somebody in your family might be sick, and that's not about making excuses for why the exam went badly. It's just a reminder that life does happen. We can't always predict things, and sometimes things don't go your way, and that might mean that you fail an exam, but it's about how you react to that failure and what you do next that is important. Which I think brings me on nicely to my second point, which is do not suffer in silence. Oh my goodness, I think this must be the most important point. Seeking out support when you're going through this at medical school or at university or in 6th form is so important. Hopefully your university will put you in touch with a group of people who are resitting the exam. So what happened with me was I found out I failed the exam in early June and the resit was at the end of August. For literally 4 or 5 weeks I was completely unaware of how many people had also failed this exam. I didn't talk to anyone about it, and then 3 weeks before the resit we had a revision lecture, and in that I could see all the people who had failed the exam because they were all at the revision lecture, and I realised, oh my goodness, I have so many people here that I can speak to and we can study together. Why did I not do this sooner? And I remember ringing my friend who'd also failed, didn't know she'd failed, gave her a ring, and she was so surprised. She was like, why didn't you tell me? And I was like, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And the minute I told her, I felt such a weight lifted. I felt so much lighter because I was like, I'm not on my own here. The other person who was good support to me at that time was my personal academic tutor. Most of the time at university you'll probably have one of these, so they're a really good person to talk to. Other people you can talk to when you fail your exams include the student union. They can be very good. Any kind of student support services. You could go to the lead tutor for your year group. You could go to the year lead for your course. If you've got a medsoc, you can go to your medsoc committee, and they should hopefully be a wellbeing secretary on the committee. And obviously your GP is your port of call if you are suffering with your mental health or you're worried about your well-being. Please seek help with your GP. And I feel like here is a good point to tell you about today's video partnership, BetterHelp. BetterHelp are a network of credentialed therapists who are experienced, and they are able to listen to you and give you helpful, unbiased advice. Starting therapy can be a big step in anyone's mental health journey. I know this myself. So you might prefer the idea of therapy online over face-to-face. I think these days we are used to the online format, and I do think it can be a little bit less daunting and more flexible to have therapy online. With BetterHelp, you can have your therapy sessions as video calls, phone calls, or even online chat, whatever works best for you. I will put the link below in the description so you can go and check them out and have a look at their website. The process of getting started with BetterHelp is really easy. You basically begin by filling out a questionnaire. They assess your specific needs and then tailor a therapist to you. And in most cases, you'll be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. You can schedule weekly therapy sessions at a time that suits you, which obviously if you're like me and a uni student, that can be really good because you need to be flexible around uni commitments. So obviously it's great if you can have that flexibility with these sessions. And if you decide that you're not really getting on well with the therapist that you're paired up with, which it can be a very common thing with things like this, then you can request to change at no additional cost to yourself. I think, you know, we spend a lot of time focusing on putting time and money into your physical health, but your mental health is just as important. Over 4 million people are already using BetterHelp to give their minds this attention. If you think you might benefit from some therapy, then definitely consider BetterHelp. Click the link in the description to have a look at their website. Clicking that link obviously helps this channel, but it will also give you 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. Thank you so much to BetterHelp for partnering with me on this video. Right, moving on now to step 3. I think this is probably, I keep saying the last step was the most important step, but this is equally an important step. It is time to revamp your study routine. Even if you feel like you had a reason why you failed the exam, for example, a one-off life event or something like that, it's still a good idea to go back over your study technique. What was going well, what wasn't going so well, and what can you improve? Essentially do a full post-mortem of everything you did in the build-up to the exam and what went well and what didn't. And that might be because there's one specific area that you feel you were weaker on, or there's one topic that you just don't really get to grips with. For example, the biggest change that I made after failing my exam was I stopped using Anki. Now Anki is obviously very hyped up in the medical student world. I think it has its strengths, and I don't doubt that some people completely pass these exams by just using Anki, but for me personally, I was wasting a lot of time making flashcards. And when I was doing like sessions of Anki, especially when I was doing it constantly every day for hours, I just felt like I wasn't really taking in the information. I was just clicking through the questions. I just felt like if I did 100 Anki questions, that was going to be enough to get everything in my brain. It wasn't. I had to actually engage with the learning and the revision, and I wasn't. But I didn't really like Anki myself. I was just using it because I felt like everyone else was. And actually, I think the best thing I ever did was admit to myself it wasn't for me. But what did I do instead, I hear you ask? Well, there's a lot of negativity about taking notes. I do believe that taking mindless notes for hours on end, pages and pages, is a waste of time. But I do think there is an argument for making notes that are concise, condensed, and have all of the key information in one place. And the process of condensing that information is a really good learning technique. I'm a visual learner. Drawing things out, drawing out diagrams, making little tables, and grouping information on a page really helps me to process it. And when I'm in the exam, I know that I'm thinking back to my notes. I remember that table that I drew out, and I can even picture it in my mind. And I guess if you want me to go into more detail about how I make my summary notes, let me know in the comments. But essentially, using a failure in an exam to improve your study technique is going to be so valuable, not just for the resit, but for the rest of your course. I have been so much more confident since I changed my study technique and accepted what I need to revise. So at this point, you have accepted that you failed the exam, you've reached out for support, you have decided how you're going to change your revision. Now you need to make a plan of action. What you need to do is map out every single day until the exam. You know, you might have 6 weeks, you might only have 2 weeks, you might have a whole year if you're resitting the year. Map it out, see what time you have and what you need to do in that time. It might feel overwhelming at this point, especially if you are 5 to 10% below the pass mark or more, but remember that you're not starting from zero, but you probably did some revision, if not a lot of revision. Try not to be overwhelmed by the resit. Make sure you don't shy away from your weaker topics as well. Like obviously for me, it was anatomy. A big part of my resit revision was anatomy, but I also had to factor in the fact I was resitting the other exam. Just making sure you get the balance right between your weak topics, but also the really important stuff. Remember that medicine is a massive, massive subject. Like you literally can't know it all. Within your study timetable, I need you to make sure you factor in time for rest. It's likely that you were burnt out already at the end of your exam season. You've probably only had a couple weeks off. You're at much higher risk of burning out if you don't rest. Do not start to cram the day you find out you failed the exam. Take that time to rest, take that time to really process the emotions before you slowly get back into a revision routine. Remember to remove all distractions. So if that means deleting Instagram, if that means muting WhatsApp, if that means, you know, literally putting your phone in a box and putting it in the cupboard for weeks on end, I don't care. You need to remove the distraction. This is crunch time now. Is the reason you failed because you were studying at home and actually after 20 minutes of revision you'd get into bed and go on your phone? Do you need to go and study somewhere else? Do you need to take yourself out of your cozy bedroom and go and sit in a library or a cafe and work there? Or do you have certain friends who always want to go out and you think, yeah, I'll go on then, I'm only young once? Now is the time to say no. You're staying in, you're getting this job done. When I failed the exams that summer, I missed a wedding that I was meant to go to because of it. I had to make sacrifices to make sure I got the job done. But at the same time, make sure that you do have days off and things to look forward to. That summer I failed, I still met up with friends. I still did date nights with Jack. Like I still had nice time. But yeah, it's about deciding what you can manage and what you can't. Also within that plan of action, is there a friend who's also failed the exams who you can pair up with and hold each other accountable? You don't necessarily have to study together, but even if you're just texting each other like, hey, what are you up to today? What's your plan for revision? Because you don't have that motivation of the rest of your cohort who are also revising anymore. You're probably in a smaller group, so it's good to be like looking after each other. And then on to step 5, which is take it day by day. Now, if you are at the bottom of that mountain, you have failed the exam and you've got a resit in a few weeks or months time, the mountain right now is going to seem pretty big. You've got a big hill to climb, especially if you feel like you failed by quite a big amount. Hopefully you've done step 2 and you've gone through your study technique and decided what you're going to change and what you're going to improve. Now you need to not panic, you need to stay calm and get down to business. Try to block out the noise from family members, from social media, from friends. Remember that this is your journey that you are on at your own pace. Remember to take this day by day and this too shall pass. Right now, it might feel like you're never going to remember all of the different names of the muscles of the jaw and all of the different branches of the brachial plexus. Oh, and also be able to recite all of the different tracks and pathways in the nervous system. Probably feels like you're not going to be able to do that, but I promise you, if you are consistent, you'll get there. And step 6 is rebuild your confidence. Now this one isn't going to be easy for some people. I didn't find it easy and it might not be something that happens straight away, but it is so important that you do not let this one failure knock your confidence, because it will have a knock-on effect on the rest of your time on this course. Remember, you are not the first to fail and you will not be the last. Like I said, we are striving for perfectionism in the course like medicine. Obviously, it's really important that we get the knowledge and we get it all right, but this is a 5-year course. It is a marathon, not a sprint. Just because you fail an exam in 1 year doesn't mean you're going to fail your finals. That's what you're working towards. When you get to finals, that is when you are deemed ready to start working as a doctor and should be competent. But that is a journey, and I know when I shared that I'd failed my exam, the majority of the comments were really nice and supportive, but there were quite a few comments that said, you're not good enough to be a doctor, maybe you should drop out. That's so embarrassing, you're a failure. It did get to me, it did upset me, but deep down I knew they were wrong. Like, I knew that me failing one exam is not enough to tell me that I'm not good enough to be a doctor. Remember what you have achieved already to get into medical school. It's as simple as going back to the drawing board, adjusting your study routine, resitting the exam, and finally meeting that standard. Do not let this failure be your villain origin story. This is just a mere blip in the road. And to finish, if you're watching this because you have failed an exam, please remember that one day this will all be behind you and you're going to be a better student because of it. And hopefully from this experience, you'll be an even better doctor. Resilience is something that you may have said you had at your medical school interview. It might be something you feel like you've already had your whole life, but failing the exam is a true test of resilience, in my opinion. And not to be cheesy, but if you can get through this, you can get through anything. Keep your head high and keep pushing forward. You'll be okay.